All right, let's go. So, routes to California. We're going to be thinking about how does geography influence the way people live as we read through this. So, we've got a little vocabulary list here. Um, procure, future time, sandbar, breastworks, and lance. So we're going to read the account below and then answer the question. So this journal entry, what you're going to read, all this, is written by a mountain man named Jedediah Strong Smith. And he lived from 1799 to 1831. And he was like the man's man. He was a legendary mountain man. And his descriptions of the West provided Americans with vital information about the vast lands located here. So this journal is from his second trip. Here he tells of a terrifying encounter with some native people of California along what is today known as the Stanislaus River. Okay, let's do this. So this is his journal, his account, and let's dive in. After weighing all the circumstances of my situation as calmly as possible, I concluded to again try the hospitality of the Californians. I had left with my party on the Appomattox River a quantity of beaver furs, and if the governor would permit me to trade, and I could find any person acquainted with the value of furs, I might procure such supplies as would enable me to continue my journey to the north. All right, so that's a lot of fancy words. So he is a trapper, so he's got beaver furs, and they're really expensive. But if you don't know anybody who actually knows the value of them, then you're not going to get your money's worth, right? So he wanted to find somebody who was acquainted with the value of them. So he could then procure supplies. He could buy stuff. So that he could continue north. Now, but to return from this anticipation, I was yet on the sandbar in sight of my dead companions, and not far off were some hundreds of Indians, indigenous people, who might in all probability close in upon us and with an arrow or club terminate all my measures for futurity, to like live, right? Such articles as would sink I threw into the river. So he's throwing his stuff in the river, and he spread the rest out on the sandbar, like all of his supplies. I told the men what kind of country we had to pass through and gave them permission to take such things as they could from the bar, like the sandbar, like the area along the river. So the people he's with, he's like, just get what you need. We got to go. After making their selection, the rest was scattered over the ground, knowing that whilst the Indians, indigenous people, were quarreling about the division of the spoils, because like they were grabbing all the stuff, we would be gaining time for our escape. We then moved on in the almost hopeless endeavor to travel over the desert plain. So they're like running away, totally outnumbered, where there was not the least probability of finding game for our substance. So this is game is referencing like hunting, food, Oregon Trail, game for our subsistence, so that they don't starve. Our provision was all lost in the affray, with the exception of about 15 pounds of dried meat. 15 pounds? You've played Oregon Trail. You know that is not going to last very long, right? 15 pounds of meat is not going to last long. Now, we had not gone more than 1/2 mile before the Indians closed around us, apparently watching the proper moment to fall on us, like attack them. I thought it most prudent to go into the bank of the river while we had it in our power. So like they dove in the river. And if the Indians allowed us time, select the spot on which we might sell our lives at the dearest rate. So he's trying to like either protect himself and fight back. We were not molested, and on arriving on the bank of the river, we took our position in a cluster of small cottonwood trees, which were generally 2 or 3 inches in diameter. That's not very big. Standing very close. So they're like hiding in trees. Now, with our knives, we looped down the small trees in such a manner as to clear a place in which to stand. Okay, so they made a hiding spot. Okay. While the fallen poles formed a slight breastwork, we then fastened our butcher knives with cords to the end of light poles so as to form a tolerable lance, and thus poorly prepared, We waited the approach of our unmerciful enemies. So lance is one of our words. So if you forgot what that means, you can always scroll back up. A lance. It's a spear. So they made little spears with their knives and these poles or these thin wooden trees. Now, on one side, the river prevented them from approaching us, them being the indigenous people. But in every other direction, the Indians were closing in upon us, and the time seemed fast approaching in which we were to come to that contest which must, in spite of courage, conduct and all that man could do, terminate in our destruction. So he firmly is like, we're going to die. He's like, we're just waiting to die. It was a fearful time. He's afraid. 8 men with but 5 guns were awaiting behind a defense made of brush the charge of 400 or 500 Indians whose hands were yet stained with the blood of their companions. So he's scared. Some of the men asked me if I thought we'd be able to defend ourselves. I told them I thought we would. So he is flat out lying to them to encourage them. He's like, we got this, guys. We can do it. But that was not my opinion. I directed that not more than 3 guns should be fired at a time, and whose only when the shot would be certain of killing. Gradually, the enemy was drawing near, but kept themselves covered from our fire. Seeing a few Indians who ventured out from their covering within long shot, I directed 2 good marksmen, marksman's somebody who's super good at shooting, to fire. They did so, and 2 Indians fell, and another was wounded. Upon this, the Indians ran off like frightened sheep, and we were released from the apprehension of immediate death. Jedediah Smith's journal, second expedition to California. Now, it'd be neat to see what the indigenous people thought about this exchange. There's these people who are coming in to where they live, could be their tribal lands and where they have lived for generations, and they feel threatened. But we don't have a written record of that. So we have to analyze Jedediah Smith's journal, knowing that we only get to see one side of the story. So the first question you're going to ask is, name 2 ways Smith uses the river to help his party survive. Okay. Name 2 ways Smith uses the trees to help his party survive. And what emotion or emotions is he feeling? And what happened to make the Native Americans run off? And the last one is what do you think? But let's be thoughtful. So do you think this type of encounter was common as Americans opened the West? So as Americans traveled. And you need to explain your answer. So were maybe indigenous people welcoming if there were kids and a baby, or would they be welcoming if you were friendly, or was everybody really angry that people were encroaching on their lands, or is there a combination? So your answer here should show thoughtful explanation, and each answer, please, needs to be in complete sentences, so capital letter and in a period, and that's our first one. So yay! And when you're done with this first journal entry, then you'll do the next one. You're going to do great. Okay, so now we're going to do the next lesson. So all was not good that glittered. This is on, I think, 292, page 292 in your book. So how does geography influence the way people live? That continues to be our essential question that we're going to be asking ourselves as we go through this. So we've got some vocabulary. So vulgar parlance, so straight talk, quarters, where someone lives, speculating in real estate, so buying land and hoping that the value goes up. A wharf is a platform for loading and unloading ships, and a municipal is related to a city government. So we're going to read this report and then answer some questions. So what are we reading? San Francisco during 1849 gold rush was a boom town. It grew from a tiny village of 800 people to a city of 25,000 people in just a year. One witness recalled that the number of people grew so fast that the government could not keep up. All right, so somebody is writing about the boomtown. A short experience of the mines had satisfied most of the citizens of San Francisco that, in vulgar parlance, all was not gold that glittered, and that hard work was not easy. Sorry, truisms for weak or lazy men. They returned very soon to their old quarters and found that much greater profits, with far less labor, were to be found in supplying the necessities of the miners and speculating in real estate. So a bunch of people moved to California to find gold, but they were either lazy or weak and they couldn't keep up with the constant mining. Gold wasn't as easy to find. And so instead of looking for gold, these people found greater profit or more success with supplying the miners with, panning or food or laundry services or, clothing, tools, or they bought up land and hoped that it would, become worth more. So tons of people went to these cities, but a lot of them were like, this is harder than I thought. This was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. So for a time, everybody made money in spite of himself. The continued advance in the price of goods and especially in the value of real estate gave riches at once to the fortunate owner of a stock or of a single advantageously situated lot of the latter. Coin was scarce, but bags of gold dust furnished a circulating medium, which answered all purposes. So inflation, everything's expensive, and everyone's finding gold dust and they're paying in gold. Coins itself, the currency, was scarce. There were few regular houses erected, but neither building materials nor sufficient labor were to be had. Okay, so they don't have lumber or nails or people to build houses, but canvas tents or houses of frame served as, a pop-up tent kind of thing. They made a frame and then they just covered it, served the immediate needs of the place. Great quantities of goods continued to pour in from the nearest ports. If you have seen San Francisco, there's tons of water over there, right? All those little, bays and things, till there were no longer stores to receive and cover them. So they're getting goods, but they have nowhere to put them because there's no shops. They didn't build any stores or warehouses. Seamen deserted their vessels soon as they dropped anchor in the bay and hastened to the mines. So even sailors would drop off their stuff and all right, I'm going to go pan for gold. Society, not merely there, but in San Francisco, was in a state of utter disorganization. Because they all have that gold fever, which became worse and more terrible as the autumn and winter months brought thousands of immigrants upon the place. We have seen that there were no municipal authorities. So there's no governor or city or regulation saying, okay, this is where shops are, this is where houses are. The zoning laws that we have today. So they didn't have that. Who could have protected the citizens and established order and made provisions for the systematic extension of the town and reception of the coming crowds? Thefts, robberies, murders, and other outrages of the most desperate and criminal nature were taking place. Eek! And there was no proper official to take notice of them and bring the offenders to justice. That's probably where the vigilantes came from. Every man was intent on merely making money and was content to shut his eye. So this person observed that everyone's just looking out for themselves and not even trying to help anybody else. And there's all this really bad stuff happening. And nobody was there to like enforce laws, because laws still exist. Like we still, shouldn't murder people and stuff. So this is the Annuals of the San Francisco in 1855. So this is 6 years after like the official gold rush, 7 years after they found that first big nugget. So this is Frank. Thanks, Frank. And let's look at our questions. What turned San Francisco into a boomtown? Well, we know, right? You know that. Yes? What did they find? It was a gold rush, right? Sorry, I'm not giving any more answers. And write that in a complete sentence. What's the meaning of the first paragraph? Okay, so we're looking at that one. The short experience of mine satisfied most citizens in a vulgar parlance. So the meaning, not all that was not gold that glittered. Okay, hard work is not easy. Okay, so it's about miners who came. All right, so you're going to summarize this in your own words. How does this document demonstrate the need for government? Ooh, that's a good one. You're going to find that down here, right? Actually, both of these two paragraphs are great examples. So you should have a source from here and a source from here. And then lastly, does this document show how geography can affect the way people live? Yes. And you're going to explain that. So some hints would be talking about the ports. Port. Where's the word port? Here it is. Wait, it's somewhere up here. So the bay, geography, okay? So access to ports. You can also talk about how the fact that there is no sufficient building materials. They're doing this in a place where there's not a lot of lumber and there's no and there's more in there, but I'm going to let you look for it. So how does geography affect the way people live? And you'll explain that. All right. And please, again, write in complete sentences. I think you're amazing. All was not gold that glittered. And scene.